I've got a 2-issue opening on Batman because everybody's late. He's got, and what do you got? So I was like, well, I've got this screenplay that I really believe in. I'm just going to take the main character out. I'm going to put Bruce Wayne in. Voila. I didn't tell him that, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
But he was like, great. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot of eyes on Batman.
Yeah.
So I knew that this was a very auspicious beginning, and I was going to have a lot of eyes on this comic, and I needed to do the best I possibly could with it. So Detective Comics, issues 35, 36 came out in the fall of 2014. And it wasn't long after that I heard from DC again saying, would you be interested in writing Green Arrow?
Welcome back, friends. Today, I drove 2 hours without AC in my car, shirtless, barefoot, still sweating up a storm, to interview an author who's also a director, who also writes for comic books, who also did a podcast, but not one where he was speaking. Welcome to the show, Benjamin Percy. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is a beautiful house. I love how it opens up right into the woods. It matches your personality perfectly.
Yeah, my company is best suited for trees.
Do you still spend the vast majority of your time alone writing? Do you have like a basement space that's all dark?
I do, yeah, right below us. I'm in the basement most of the day playing with my imaginary friends.
That's amazing. So
aside from the occasional, Zoom meeting or whatever,
yeah,
I probably spend too much time in my head.
Or the rare podcast. It's the only one you've ever recorded here in person, right?
That's right, yeah.
Wow, I'm so honored. So in your own words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
I am a storyteller. I guess that's what you could say. I write across mediums and I write across genres. So, as you mentioned, I write comics. I also write novels, dabble in journalism. I, am a screenwriter and a baby director, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you did that short film, 13th Night?
Yeah,
yeah. Is that the only thing you've directed so far?
There's something about just hitting your 40s where you start to look back and look forward. You realize time's running out, and I just recognize that if I don't direct a horror movie, and I mean specifically a horror movie, I'm going to be disappointed in myself. So I started to sort of build towards that. And one of the ways that you develop a resume is you try out smaller projects and build up people's confidence so they'll hopefully finance, a feature. So I've actually made 3 short films, 2 of them 0 budget. 13th Night, which you can find online now. We took that on the film festival circuit and I applied for a grant. So that was actually, a funded, budgeted short film. It's only 15 minutes, but
I watched the trailer.
It was a tricky sort of thing. Like me no longer just being at my desk coming up with stuff, but me being in the field trying to implement all of these ideas and serving as the producer as well, but also serving as the accountant and serving as, the construction crew and serving as the caterer and. It took me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, but you've been self-employed for quite a while, so you're used to kind of covering all the bases and working with different people. Let me kind of briefly tell your background, because we don't have 5 hours to talk, because you have important meetings later. So you are from Oregon. You grew up kind of in the woods. Your parents would bring you to look for rocks and stuff, camping and do that type of thing. So you're a huge, huge nature guy. And then after school, you got a job working at Glacier National Park, and you were thinking you were going to be Indiana Jones, and realized that it's not quite as cool as you think it is. It's more so just rocks, but there's not going to be, not the action-packed world that Indiana Jones is. You met your wife there, I believe, and she was the one who convinced you that you should start writing. From there, I don't really know what happened. So you went to grad school immediately for like English and for writing?
I was actually still in my undergrad when I was working at Glacier National Park. I was thinking about dropping out. So I retreated to the wilderness, and I was a gardener at Many Glacier Lodge, and she was a waitress, and I was writing her love letters and poems, in addition to, just keeping a journal for the first time in my life. Not the Dear Diary kind of journal, but the kind of journal where you're, jotting down images, scenes, building up ideas. And when she sort of pushed me in that direction, and I'd been pushed in that direction by a few others as well. But it helps when a pretty lady's telling you something to do.
Sure.
I went back to school. I signed up for my first creative writing course and was locked in.
Wow.
Locked in not just to a life as a writer, never looking back, but locked into, that waitress as well. We we ended up, engaged, married, still together to this day. That's one of the reasons I live in the Midwest.
The ride or die homie. So right. That was Glacier National Park. Is that Montana? Where is it?
Montana. Yeah.
Okay. So then when you went back to school, was it specifically for English?
Yeah. So I was an anthropology major and switched over to English.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And, specifically it was writing that I wanted to do.
So why'd you get into being a professor? Years. Was that just because that was like a more realistic job path?
I never dreamed of being a teacher. I ended up really enjoying it though.
Yeah. Okay.
I taught for close to a decade. Cause as soon as I got into grad school, that's one of the things they do is, they treat you like an indentured servant where it's like, you can come here and take, grad workshops and write your dissertation, but to get your tuition covered, you have to teach these comp courses. So, taught comp at first when I was in grad school, then ended up getting a job as a visiting professor, my first big boy job at Marquette. So I was there for 3 years. Then I was at UW Stevens Point for a year. And then I was at Iowa State teaching in their graduate program and also teaching at University of Iowa in the Writers Workshop. And the goal the entire time was to do the best job I possibly could as a teacher, but to be a writer, a full-time writer. And as soon as I'm fast forwarding through a lot here, but as soon as I, got that book deal that allowed me to sort of break free and go full-time at the desk, I did so.
So you were teaching writing classes, right?
Yeah. Okay. They ranged. They ranged. At first, it was more like composition, as I mentioned, or technical writing. And then as I, moved from university to university, got more, street cred because I was publishing.
Right.
Then I was able to teach creative writing exclusively.
Yeah, because I would feel like being in that position, yes, you graduate from school, so obviously like you understand how to write, but you hadn't become a successful writer. So don't you feel like a little bit of an imposter talking to the college kids of like, hey, this is how you become a successful writer, but I'm not one yet?
Sort of two ways to answer that question. One, they don't want you to talk about the business of writing when you're teaching writing. It's actually frowned upon. Which
why?
I absolutely agree with your perspective. Is like, why would you not teach people how to make a living as a writer? But it's all about the art. So anyways, when it comes to feeling like a fraud, that's the first part of the question.
Yeah.
By the time I was teaching, I was publishing, but I was publishing short stories and I was publishing essays.
Okay.
The time I felt like a fraud though was when I had to teach a novel writing course, and it was at UW Stevens Point. And I had written 4 failed novels.
Ones that didn't sell.
So nothing puts the fear of God in you, like having to stand up in front of a room of people and, feign expertise.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing that I had done with my short stories early on. I don't know why it had never occurred to me up until this point not to do so, but I had always broken down short stories. I would read like a Flannery O'Connor short story 5, 6, 7 times, emotionally detach myself from it, and look at it again in a technical, cold way so that I could sort of like pick apart its component sections, figure out how they all function together, and that taught me how to plot short stories. I hadn't done that with novels. So as I was trying to figure out what I was going to teach in this class, I took some of my favorite books and I read them and I read them again and I read them again and I read them again, emotionally detached myself from them and just looked under the hood, broke them down, beat by beat, figured out how chapters worked, etc. I could go deep and nerdy on this, but I don't think it's any coincidence that semester when I was teaching that class is when I sold my first novel.
I feel like, though, based on what you were just saying, where they want to focus on the art of it, isn't that somewhat discouraged then to teach that type of approach to a class of like, hey, this is the analytical of why this would work? Because that does take away from the like creativity side a little bit, doesn't it?
If you're writing literary fiction, which is what the focus is of most MFA programs, and there are some exceptions. There are some programs like Reno's. There's one in Maine, Stone Coast, where they focus on genre fiction, but mostly it's literary fiction, or poetry, or creative nonfiction. And there's just not a commercial audience for that. That would be like you're taking an art class on portraits,
Sure. Yeah.
And somebody's trying to teach you how to make bank on it. That they're not really in money and literary fiction aren't necessarily in conversation.
How do you define?
But I'm now more of a genre guy.
Well, how do you define literary fiction for people who aren't authors? Because I've heard you say that in other interviews, and I'm like, fiction to me is fiction. Like, sure. I get there's fantasy novels and there's horror, but what exactly is literary fiction?
I mean, I'm with you, but it's just the way the industry talks.
Sure.
So literary fiction is I'm doing like the ridiculous version of it right now. I'm doing like the stereotypical version of it. It's so focused on the three-dimensionality of the characters and the subterranean themes and the glowing metaphors that it occasionally forgets that people want to know what happens next.
Sure.
So let's say plot can be a dirty word in some of those creative writing workshops.
Okay.
Whereas genre fiction, right? There's a wizard, there's magical sword, there's robots with laser eyes, there's werewolves howling in the night. Literary fiction might blow your mind when it comes to like the beauty of the sentences, but genre fiction never forgets that all 6 cylinders need to be blazing in that story engine.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that's what the average person actually wants to consume.
Yeah,
it's a little bit more like
escape,
commercially viable. So when you were writing those short stories and everything, was it all horror stuff, or like when did you start writing horror?
I was absolutely writing literary fiction because that's what I was required to write.
Okay.
That's all we were reading in those classes. That's all we were writing in those classes. Genre, again, plot's a dirty word, genre is a dirty word.
Sure.
It was oftentimes in the syllabus at the beginning of the semester, no genre fiction.
Okay.
So I fell in love with literary fiction. I still am in love with literary fiction. No shade to literary fiction. But I never fell out of love with genre.
Yeah.
And, I was introduced through these classes to, writers like James Baldwin or Leslie Silko. And I just, was fully invested for the length of my academic tenure. Once I got out of an MFA program, though, I was like, give me some Conan.
Sure. Because there's no more handcuffs, no more restrictions. But so your first thing you got published as far as a novel, was that the Wilding?
Yeah.
Wilding. But that is still, isn't that like some kind of a mystery horror type suspense book?
It is. Yeah. Some of my early short stories, they have genre components to them, even if they were published in the Paris Review. There's still like some genre components because I guess I could never shrug that off.
Yeah.
But then I just started more and more leaning fully into, helicopter explosions and ninja assassins. But the Wilding, that's, you could say it's like has some comparisons to Deliverance. It's a wilderness thriller.
Sure. Was that the book that you're referring to that you got your book deal and you were able to move on? Or
no.
Was that Red Moon?
That was Red Moon.
That was Red Moon. How much time went?
I had Language of Elk. That was a book of short stories. I had Refresh. That was a book of short stories. I had The Wilding, which is, it's sort of like a hybrid organism. It's both literary and genre.
But that was the first novel?
The first novel.
Yeah, okay.
And then came Red Moon, which was a werewolf novel.
Yeah. So how long was it in between that? And when you say that you like sold the book, I guess how does that actually, like, you have to have a pitch and everything, but how does that work?
So typically when you're trying to sell a novel, you have, if you're a first time author, you have the whole manuscript.
Yeah. You've already written the whole thing.
Unless you're established in some other arena.
Yeah.
Like you're a TV writer. You might be able to get away with a partial. But after you sell a few books, what you can do is put together, let's say, 70 pages of a sample, along with a Bible, along with an outline that, is a commercial essentially for the project.
Yeah.
And so with Red Moon, I had 3 books, under my, in the hopper at that point. So I was able to go forth, and it was actually, Red Moon was a failure before it was a success. In that around the same time, you're asking about timeline stuff.
Yeah.
So Wilding came out in 2010.
Yeah.
But I sold it in 2007.
Okay.
There was a major revision involved. Came out in 2010. at 2010, I was simultaneously selling Red Moon, which did not come out until 2013. The book business moves slowly.
Right. Sure.
But the reason I say that Red Moon was initially a failure is that I had pitched it as a comic series initially.
Oh, okay.
And I pitched comics from 2009 until 2014.
How come that was like so front and center of your mind to even do at that point in time? Because you had stuff out, but you hadn't done anything. You hadn't collaborated on any comics or anything at that point, right?
But I grew up on comics. I grew up obsessed with comics. And, the way in for me was, as a constant reader, it never occurred to me I could actually write comics. But I was teaching a book called Voodoo Heart when I was at Iowa State.
Okay.
In one of my classes. And on the East Coast, Sarah Lawrence, the guy who wrote Voodoo Heart, was teaching my book, Refresh. So we started corresponding by email. We started talking on the phone. Around this time, he was published in an anthology. It was a prose anthology, but it was superhero themed.
Okay.
Who Will Save Us Now?
Cool.
He did a reading at a Barnes & Noble. He didn't know it. He was with a bunch of other authors from the anthology. He didn't know it, but there were DC and Marvel editors in the audience. And they came up afterwards. They're like, yo, you guys like superheroes, pitch us something. So he started to pitch. He started to break in. And I was like, can I please see those pitches? Can I see those scripts? Sure. I want to learn more. Everything in my career has been incremental. It's not, I always I try and fail. And then I kick down the door. So I started to look at his pitches. Turns out this guy, if you're a nerd, you know this name. This guy who wrote Voodoo Heart, his name is Scott Snyder. He is one of the biggest names in comics now. Okay. But we were both just babies, beardless babies at the time. Anyways, he started to really break out, and I couldn't get in at first. I pitched Red Moon as like a 30-issue series. I always go too far. At first, I'm like, this 30-issue horror series will change everything about comics.
And the comic editors are like, why you think we're going to pay you for 30 comics?
Exactly. It's like, you've never written a comic, dude. We're not giving you a 30-issue arc. But anyways, my agent was like, I really like this idea. What if it was a novel instead? Pitched as a novel. And that was the book that allowed me to, go full-time as a writer.
Wow.
But I never stopped pitching comics.
Sure.
So from 2009, 2014, that's another story. 2014 is when I finally broke in at DC.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the best way to go about it, because if something comes too easy, you haven't figured out all the ways that it could fail yet. It's kind of best to fail on all the different things, because you figure out how to avoid all these like mistakes in the future, because you already figured all those things out.
I mean, this is true of so many disciplines, but if you're in the arts, if you're in writing, is just like a chorus in your life.
Yeah.
You're going to keep hearing it over and over again. And you have to develop a callus around your heart the size of a catcher's mitt. Like, you just have to like push past those no's. And I think that being steadfast, being bullheaded, it's as important, if not more important, than talent.
Yeah.
It's every single, genre, every single medium that I've written in has come with a mountain of failure. Prior to me breaking my way in. And when I break in, it's usually like in the foothills, There's a long way to go to the summit.
Yeah. I mean, that's always how it is, especially if you're asking somebody to like invest. And I like to think of it as like, it's not really a no. It's just a not yet that you're hearing. Yeah, because people aren't like closing the door on you forever, unless you pissed them off personally or something. Usually they're just like, you're not ready, or we don't need that thing yet. Right now it just doesn't make sense until it is time. Look at this, like Brent, our mutual friend, which we'll get to. I hit him up and it was like, I don't know, probably more times than most people I've hit up. I was like, hey, when can we get this on the schedule? And he's like, not right now. I'm super busy, but I want to. But it was just busy. It took a while before we could actually line that up. If my ego got in the way and I was like, well, if you're too busy, I'm too busy, then I wouldn't be sitting here with you either, right? It's like in most creative fields, that's how it is. And that's how it is with like most of the sponsors I've worked with. I reached out to them and they were like, oh, this is cool what you're doing, not right now. And then I just kept hitting him up. And eventually, finally, I was making a living. But talking about making a living, how do you make a living from your first book? Not your first book, but the Red Moon book. Do you sell it to a publisher and they're like, okay, here's $100,000. We get the rights to this forever. Or is it like, okay, we'll publish this and you're going to get a cut of $3 a book. And you notice that there was enough coming in after 3 months, you were good. How does that work?
It's complicated. I think you would have a very hard time making a living as one thing as a writer.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about novels, that's not all I'm doing, right? There's a kind of diversification that you could say is equivalent to a stock portfolio or a gambler, standing over a craps table or a roulette wheel, where it's like you spread out your chips. Yeah. So yes, when it comes to a novel, first they're going to give you an advance. That's a chunk of money, but that advance is, then held over you. Sure. And you're not going to see any money until your sales exceed that advance.
So that's kind of how music artists work, I think. They get an advance. Sorry, I was just talking about this with a music artist recently when he was signed to Republic. They had advanced him for his first album, and it just made me think of it. Anyways, keep going.
Sometimes you'll never see any residuals.
Yeah, because you don't break that number.
Sometimes, right, with my early books, I had low advances, and that's passive income for the rest of your life.
Sure.
So you get these small checks quarterly. When it comes to comics, totally different deal. When it comes to movies, totally different deal, right? There's all these different ways of getting paid.
Sure.
And if you're not, I'm not going to say I'm business savvy. My focus is mostly just telling stories.
Yeah.
But if you're not thinking about where those chips are on the table, you can end up high and dry.
Yeah, I think most self-employed people in any kind of creative realm, they usually have multiple streams of income. That's just kind of how it works. I make a little bit of money I make most of my money from product placement, but then I'll get paid to do individual interviews that are on my show, but then I'll get paid to do interviews that aren't even on my show at all, but then I'll get paid to be at this certain event. It's the only way to really make a living doing it is if you have all of these little things, but it takes a little while to build that up. Yeah. So how long was it from when you got that advance to when you did walk away from your commitments teaching? Was it this month, or was it okay, by the end of this semester I'm done, or was it a year?
So my wife, that waitress from Many Glacier Lodge, she grew up on a dairy farm outside of Eau Claire, and she's very practical as a result of that.
Okay.
And she comes from a long line of teachers as well.
Cool.
So, when I was let me quit, she's like, hold on there, Buster.
I think you're a big shot.
And it's good. It's good. It's like, hey, honey, I just, won this award. She's like, great, take out the garbage, hot shot. She keeps me grounded. But she had a very practical response. And, maybe this is helpful to anybody else who's thinking about taking a leap, where she said, let's see if you can make more money off of your writing for 5 years, more money on your writing than you're teaching.
Wow.
So actually Red Moon was almost a tipping point because I was already making more money off of my writing than my teaching at that point.
Okay.
But through Red Moon, there was another novel called The Deadlands, and that just sort of pushed it over the edge.
Wow. I mean, honestly, to be able to make more money from your side thing than your full-time job that you're putting full-time hours into is a task most people aren't capable of, but clearly she pushed you and it worked out.
you gotta be a bit of a psychopath. When I was teaching, to give you an example, I was at Marquette for 3 years. And while I was at Marquette, I was pretty broke.
Yeah.
I was not getting paid a lot of money to be a visiting professor there.
Sure.
We lived in a small apartment on Milwaukee Ave. And we had, by year 2, a baby boy.
Wow.
So I was making coffee at 1 a.m., 11 p.m., midnight, whatever.
Sure.
And then I would write until, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then I would go to sleep, and I would wake up at 9 or 10, and I would prep for my teaching, right?
Wow.
And so it's I couldn't do that now.
Right, yeah.
But I was just, and then I was working because I wanted out of that position.
Yeah.
And the same thing would happen at Stevens Point. And then I got a cushier job at Iowa State teaching in the graduate program.
Sure.
So I went from, UW Stevens Point. I had a great experience there, but it's a heavy teaching load. It's with teaching college, right? So it was 4 different preps. And, it was probably 70 hours a week.
Wow.
Okay. But I was just writing.
Yeah.
Because that's what I wanted to do.
Sure.
And eventually got to a place where I could have, at Iowa State even, I was writing, generally speaking, I would still write 40 hours a week.
Sure.
When I was there.
Wow. Yeah.
With some exceptions.
Your wife put up with you quite a bit then by not being around. No, I mean, I think that's a really good lesson to be able to paint for people is that most people I've talked to and do something in a creative realm, I have people ask me all the time, how do you do this for a living? And they think it's just, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this thing. And it's the more accurate response is unless you're making money doing this as a hobby, you're not going to immediately make money when you quit your job either. Like, you need to be able to build whatever this side thing is to be making money that is like at least close to livable, you know, before you end up switching over. And not everybody wants to hear that answer because it's hard. But the truth is, you can do that while you keep your job. You're not really taking any risks. You just have to put in the actual work. So let's get to the really fun writing. From my standpoint, even though I'm not a big comic book nerd, that's still something that I can relate to a little bit more with the superheroes and all that. Was the first thing that you did diving into comics and superheroes, was it that podcast you did, the Wolverine one?
No, it was actually Batman. So
cool.
Another story of failure that became a success.
Yeah.
I had written a screenplay, and it made the rounds in Hollywood. And as always, I was overly ambitious. This spec script would have cost $300 million to make. You know, it involved an airport, and it was a terrorist situation. It was kind of like a Die Hard scenario.
And you're like, the story's good enough, they'll just do it.
They'll just do it, right? Instead of like, you know, same thing with that comic. Like, I'm like, here's a 30-issue horror series with characters nobody's ever heard of. You know, instead of like pitching a one-shot of Thor.
Sure.
So in this case, I had a screenplay that had made the rounds that had failed, but I had developed a relationship with DC Comics at this point.
Okay.
You know, because I'd been pitching them. And Mark Doyle, who was then at first the editor of Vertigo, but then became the head of the Back Group. That's actually a job. You're the head of the Back Group. So there's not just Batman, right? There's Detective Comics, there's Batman and Robin, there's maybe a Harley Quinn book. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Lots of Bat books. He had gone to a few of my book readings in New York. He toured me through the DC offices. So we developed a relationship, and he was finally like, okay, Ben, have mercy. You know, you keep pitching me. I've got a 2-issue opening on Batman because everybody's late. He's got, and what do you got? So I was like, well, I've got this screenplay that I really believe in. I'm just going to take the main character out. I'm going to put Bruce Wayne in. Voila. I didn't tell him that, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
But he was like, great. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot of eyes on Batman.
Yeah.
So I knew that this was a very auspicious beginning, and I was going to have a lot of eyes on this comic, and I needed to do the best I possibly could with it. So Detective Comics, issues 35, 36 came out in the fall of 2014. And it wasn't long after that I heard from DC again saying, would you be interested in writing Green Arrow?
Did you feel like that was a drop down? Like you got demoted doing Green Arrow? Not trying to talk smack about it, but in comparison to Batman, he's not quite the A-list celeb.
I was just so grateful to be writing comics.
Sure.
I was thrilled. And I put everything I had into that. I was in a bake-off situation, which oftentimes happens. A bake-off means they ask you, are you interested? And you say yes. And they say, great, give us a pitch. And
Sure.
the bake-off is there's like
multiple bidders.
Yeah. Other people doing the same thing as you.
Sure.
But I won that bake-off. I got Green Arrow. Soon after that came Teen Titans.
Yeah.
I was part of this thing called Rebirth at DC. Rebirth was a major relaunch of all their titles. So there was a lot of media attention that surrounded it. There's a big boost in sales as a result. I was in the thick of things with DC. I was attending summits. I was, getting essentially a mentorship from Jeff Johns, who's the chief creative officer, teaching me all about the trade, how to break down issues. So it was really intense and really fun. But in the midst of all this, after a few years, DC is under new management right now. So I'm not speaking ill of them, but there was a lot of let's say corporate control during that time, kind of a lot of micromanaging. And one of the weird things that happened, there were a few weird things that happened, but just say the breaking point was I was writing Nightwing. I had a 2-year storyline that was greenlit. And in another series, my character got shot in the head and had amnesia. And so all of a sudden, in the middle of this storyline, I had to take a hard exit ramp.
Oh, no.
And my character had amnesia and was not going to remember who they were.
Is that a common thing?
It wasn't
that
like a
happens
3
across
month
the universe?
3 month thing. It was like a forever thing.
Sure, but is that something that happens? I mean, there's so many characters in the Marvel universe or DC universe. Is that something that happens when like you're writing Batman and you're like, oh, he's fighting Riddler and he did this thing, and that affects somebody else's comic? Or
there's two ways to answer that. One, what sort of editorial, goals are there? Because sometimes it comes from on high, like we need to make this change.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just you're in the wake of another series. So I'd say Teen Titans was one of the hardest series for me to write because all those characters were in other stories that were more mainline titles, right? Yeah. So like Kid Flash, right? There's the Flash comic. Whatever happened in the Flash comic could trickle down to me. Here's Damian Wayne. Anything in the Batman stories could trickle down to me. Here's Aqualad. Anything in the Aquaman series could trickle, and so on. So Green Arrow is great because he's just like off in Seattle doing his thing, and nobody cares what's going on there. There's not a lot of threaded continuity, so I could just like go wild, with no repercussions. But anyways, Nightwing, that I don't know. I had like a moment there where I was like, I could keep going, but everybody's going to blame me for this because it's a bad idea. Yeah. So I quit, and that could have been it. Oh wow. I could have been done in comics. But I got lucky in that right around the same time, I was approached about launching a podcast at Marvel. So they didn't know what it was going to be about. They're just like, it's Wolverine. We're going to do an audio drama with Wolverine. What do you got? Bake-off situation. But I love Wolverine. Wolverine is my favorite character in comics. So I put together a 50-page single-spaced pitch. Oh, God. And I did my homework. I read up on all these podcasts. I figured out what made them work. I'm talking about fictional podcasts. Yeah. And so I was able to apply that to my pitch, and I got it. So here I am writing Wolverine, and that series turned out to be it sounds annoying when I say a huge hit. It was a huge hit, millions of downloads. Cool. And I got a second series. So I wrote 10 episodes. Yeah. You just compare that to TV. Sure. One guy does not write 10 episodes of TV, with few exceptions, like Craig Mazin.
Yeah, usually they bring people in for individual.
Usually write it. So it's a lot of work, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But I did 10 episodes. Then I got a second season. I did 10 episodes. At that point, Marvel proper was like, come on over and let's do some comics. Sure. It started off with an adaptation of Wolverine the Long Night. Yeah. That audio drama. And then I got into the larger X-Men group. And there's more of a story there as well. But, anybody who's listening, you can listen to Wolverine the Long Night.
I was listening to it on the way here.
It's free. Any podcast platform you use. Just look up Wolverine the Long Night.
Yeah, it's badass. And I don't think that many people have ever listened to that type of a podcast before. Like, until my brother-in-law was working on one, I didn't know that those things existed. Yeah. I was like, what do you mean a TV show that's audio only? Yeah. And then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty good. I interviewed Lamorne Morris a long time ago, and then he released a show like that too. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. It's like a cooler version, in my opinion, of an audiobook, or a more immersive. But that wasn't what you were like initially hoping to write. You were hoping to write a comic book. So when you write like a script, or because you must just write the script then, really, for that.
When you write a screenplay, there's a hands-off approach to directing too much, how the cinematography will work, or what kind of music might be included. Because
you mostly hand it off.
You sort of hand off a screenplay to the director and to all the other people who are experts in their field. The cinematographer and blah, blah, blah. The costume department, the special effects department. They want enough white space, let's say, in your script to be able to impart their own visions. Yeah. But with audio, it's a little bit more mom and pop. And so they want you to be really aggressive with your scripts. Okay. And to give a direction, essentially, like to be, okay, in this moment, we're going to fade the music out, and the sound of, the sea is going to start to slap against the hull of the ship. And you're going to hear the squeak of boots and the creak of rigging and seagulls screeching. Like, all of that stuff is in the script in a way that you would never do if you're writing a screenplay. Sure. But audio presented a lot of, again, as you said, I had no plans to write audio. Right. That was just an opportunity that opened up, and I jumped at it.
So when you worked on it,
and I didn't know the rules, and it was bewildering to me. I had to invent a new storytelling arsenal because it was like, how do you write a fight scene
Yeah.
in audio and not completely confuse people?
Right.
Or all those other things that you, immediately understand if you're reading a comic or if you're watching a show or a movie, like in a half second, right? You understand what time of year it is, what time of day it is, where you are, maybe when you are, like what year it might be, just because of all these visual cues. You don't have any of that.
Yeah.
And so I had to like start from scratch essentially.
Did you have a lot of draft like back and forth when you did sell it and now it's going to the director and all these people? Were you then pretty involved with the process of it being made? Like
very involved.
Like J.K. Rowling is an example. During the Harry Potter stuff, they kept talking to her throughout. Like, hey, can we do this because of blah, blah, blah? Like you were in talks with them through the whole creative process of it?
Yeah, from start to finish.
Wow.
Even more so later on with my Guardians of the Galaxy audio drama, which is called Wastelanders, Old Man Star-Lord. It's like post-apocalyptic Marvel. With that one, I was actually in the studio. And when I say in the studio, it was during the pandemic. So I was zooming in.
Yeah.
And everybody was in different studios.
Sure.
But like, there's Chris Elliott and I'm talking to him.
Yeah.
There's Danny Glover. There's Vanessa Williams. And,
wow.
They're like, sometimes like this line just doesn't sound right, when they say it out loud as opposed to when it's on the page. And so I'd rewrite stuff in the moment.
Did you have any temptation to want to play Wolverine in that? I feel like your voice would work for it.
Yeah. Have your people talk to my people.
I want to be a voice actor. I feel like that'd be really cool. So anyway, after that, then you got the job writing Wolverine and you did for a long time, like what, 3 years or something? I mean, you did for quite a while.
I've been writing Wolverine for Marvel since 2017. I'm still writing Wolverine.
Wow.
But though, in a different capacity now, like I've got this series called Wolverine Deadpool.
Okay.
And anyways, it started off, again, we're getting in the weeds here with nerd stuff, but there's this guy named Jonathan Hickman. He's a total rock star in the comics world. I was in touch with him prior, so again, relevant to any listeners, like connections matter, not in a dirty sort of way, but like organic relationships that develop over time where you're actually like buddies with somebody.
Yeah, totally.
So Jonathan Hickman, reached out to me. He's like,
hey, I think you'd kill it on X-Force.
He's from South Carolina and wears seersucker suits.
This is your tryout.
Not really. Sorry, Jonathan Hickman. But he called me up and he was relaunching the X-Men. And just like the Bat Group, which I was talking about before, the X Group is big. There's lots of titles.
Yeah.
It's not just Batman, right? There's Harley Quinn, there's Detective Comics, as I was talking about. In the same way, X-Men, X-Force, Excalibur, I could keep going.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's 16 titles, mutant titles going at the single time. So Jonathan Hickman is relaunching the X-Men universe and he needs collaborators to write these series.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hell yeah. He brought me on board for X-Force. It was this new era for the mutants where they like separated themselves from humankind and formed an island nation called Krakoa and blah, blah, blah. I could keep nerding out on this, but it was a fresh start and similar to what happened to me at DC where I had a fresh start with Rebirth.
Yeah.
So launched X-Force, wrote X-Force, which is, like the Black Ops team.
Sure.
X-Men. Wrote that for like 6 months, and then they're like, you get Wolverine as well. And that was not a bake-off situation. They're just like, you're the Wolverine guy now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of times it is like once you're a trusted person, the people who are making these decisions only have so many people that they trust and that they're going to go to. And especially with something that's bigger, it's the same reason like a huge director is going to get tons of opportunities all the time because they're like, well, we know that you're successful until you fail, which hopefully, you never fail. So
I am in the position now. It's a lucky position where when it comes to Marvel Comics, there's no more pitching that goes on. They're just like, how about this? And I'm like, yeah.
But when you are pitching though, is that something where it's like unpaid at first? You're like, okay, I'm just going to go in and however many times I put in these hours and they're just wasted most of the time.
Absolutely. And that goes for TV and film as well. Like you put in a lot of hours and those hours can just turn to dust.
So when you are writing something like Wolverine, because it has so many like things that it's impacted by, like because obviously Wolverine's not the only character in the thing. He's interacting with other people. A lot of times those people kind of cross over. What are all the restrictions and stuff that go into it? Do you have the higher up tell you like, okay, well this is the box. They're allowed to do this. These are things they're not allowed to do.
Well, it requires knowledge on your own part, first of all. Like, you should have, if you're taking over the series, have a sense of legacy. Some of these characters have been around for 80 years, 40 years. You should know what they've done, who their best sidekicks are, who their best villains are, what their core characteristics are.
Yeah, but you don't know what's going to happen
next.
That,
but
right?
you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what's happening in these other sideline series. So one of the things that happened with X-Men is that we had a Zoom meeting, all of us, every 2 weeks. Oh. And we also had in-person meetings twice a year. So every 2 weeks we get on a Zoom, we talk about what everybody's doing in their series, we coordinate. Right? Because you're like at these individual titles, but you've also got this larger tapestry. And people will be like, can I use Wolverine for this issue? And I'm like, well, what do you want to do with him? And da-da-da. Well, that doesn't fit. Or how about this? And, it's just like lots of horse trading that goes on.
Yeah.
And now, that X group is over. I'm still writing Wolverine in a different capacity, but I'm now more like off on my own while this other X group is doing their own stuff. Sure. And I try to write my stories so that they're just sort of evergreen. Like they're not too beholden to continuity.
Oh, okay.
But Marvel gets everybody together twice a year. All their core writers. They get them together in the mothership and we spend a week, in a boardroom breaking story.
What is something that was an idea of yours or somebody else's that you wanted to do, but it got nixed because either they came to you, you're like, that's an awesome idea, but it can't because of these other things, or it was something you wanted to do that was a great idea, but somebody else was like, no, it won't work because we're going a different direction with this?
Oh, I mean, I run into roadblocks all the time, but we've been talking about persistence, and sometimes it's just, like you said before, it's a not yet situation.
Yeah.
Just to give you an example of that, as soon as I heard that Disney had bought 20th Century Fox, I know the Xenomorphs and the Yautja, aliens and Predator exist in the 20th Century Fox universe.
Yeah.
And so I texted, as soon as I saw the deadline headline, I texted CB, the EIC, the editor-in-chief of Marvel, and I was like, you have to give me Predator versus Wolverine.
Yes.
And he responded, no.
Oh, no.
And so I set a timer on my phone. Every 3 months, my alert goes off, contact CB. So I check in with him. Now. And eventually he was like, fine. I mean, the reason that he didn't want it to happen at first is because he wanted just Marvel to have a Predator series, to have an Alien series, to just do their own thing for a while before they started to intersect with Marvel heroes.
Oh, so you were pitching a story that they weren't even looking for at the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it took 2 years.
Okay.
To get a yes.
Is that how?
And I knew it was an awesome idea.
Yeah.
That was in my head when I was in 3rd grade.
Sure. But that's not how it usually works, right? Usually they're looking for somebody to take over something like Wolverine or whatever. They're not like, oh, you have an idea to do something different. And just be
typically, if you're inside the Marvel machine, like there aren't many occasions where you're like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. Instead, it's more like a conversation that evolves over time, and the editors have ideas and they bounce them off you, and you develop ideas together.
Wow.
But in this case, I was like, Predator versus Wolverine. It just has to happen.
Yeah, which is like
all my macho
new,
80s
right?
dreams coming true.
So you have written way more things than we're going to have time to touch on, because you've written for movies and TV shows. You've written a lot of different comics. You've written graphic novels. You've written a lot of things. So I want to go through a couple, I say a handful of quick questions for you, little rapid fire.
Hit me.
Of all the superheroes that exist across all the universes, who are your favorite 3?
Wolverine, Punisher, Batman, Conan. I answered unfairly. I added in another one there.
I feel like, does the Punisher count as a superhero? He's kind of like
well, I don't know what Wolverine does either. I mean, they're anti-heroes. That's my, favorite territory is morally gray anti-heroes.
Perfect. Well, then this maybe is a gray area. What about supervillains? What are your favorite 3?
I mean, the sweetest costume of any supervillain, I think, belongs to Doctor Doom. That steel-plated face and the green hood.
Yeah.
Lightning fingers. I love it.
Yeah. Brent picked him too. What are your other 2?
Other 2, I love Jigsaw. He is a Punisher villain.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So like,
Is it the same character as the Saw
he
movie?
looks like his name. He's, a patchwork of scars stitched
weird.
together.
But that's a different IP entirely from Jigsaw and Saw movies, right?
Yeah.
It just happens to be the same name.
Yeah.
Wow.
Other folks, let's see. I mean, Sabretooth probably. I was able to build up towards a major event called Sabretooth War when I was writing Wolverine, and it was, as promised, the goriest, most violent Wolverine story ever written.
Hell yeah. Okay, so you've gotten to write a lot of them. Some adaptations rule, some adaptations aren't that good. What has been your favorite superhero adaptation as far as like a movie goes? Which one's your favorite and which one underperformed the most?
Oh, Logan, 100% my favorite. So if you haven't seen that, James Mangold's Logan, it is, it's got so much heart to it. Logan is a broken man. Xavier has sort of lost his powers and is essentially suffering from dementia. And it's just this sort of like sad afterword to the story of the X-Men.
Which one do you think is the worst? I know Daredevil is the one that stands out. Most people say was awful.
Yeah, the Fantastic Four. Not the new one. I'm excited to see that, but the early ones, the Eternals, maybe. There's some stinkers out there.
Okay, what about with horror? What are your favorite 3 horror novels?
Ooh. I will say, rather than favorites, let me just start off by saying the scariest novel that I have read in recent memory is called Incidents Around the House by Josh Mallerman. It's terrifying. I think you should race out and go pick up a copy. He's the same guy who wrote Bird Box.
Okay.
Other 2 favorites, I love Salem's Lot. I think that's one of Stephen King's best. But I love so much in the Stephen King library that it's sort of hard for me to say that's the one. But I have to give a shout out to Uncle Steve if we're talking about horror. I guess I'll go with Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. I just, she's the OG. She and I guess I can point to a few others like Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley sort of like invented, so many of the archetypes that we follow to this day. But that's the ultimate haunted house story, The Haunting of Hill House.
Okay, what about films? I know when I talked to Brent, he picked out for his favorite ones being like the initial monster movies from the 30s.
Yeah.
But for scary, because you put out a short film, 13th Night, that was terrifying, and it's 15 minutes, and we talked about it, and you can go stream it, so everyone should go stream it right now. Just Google it. You'll be able to find it. What are the 3 scariest movies you've ever seen?
Ooh, scary isn't always the same thing as favorite, but, The Exorcist is both.
Sure.
I watch it every year. I'm absolutely in love with it. I think it also captures that divide that we were talking about before, that literary genre divide.
Sure.
And that it is as soulful and poetic as it is full of jump scares and, eerie atmosphere.
Yeah.
The Descent. I don't know if anybody's
They go
seen
into
that,
caves, right?
It's about this group of adventurers.
Yeah.
This group of women who get together every year and do something wild. And these adrenaline seekers go into a charted cave system, and bad things happen. And it combines so many different fears. Like there's the fear of the dark. There's the fear of the tight space. There's the fear of, the long drop. There's the fear of albino humanoid cannibals.
That is one thing that I never want to get into is spelunking. Okay. Predator. I love Predator. And me and my girlfriend, we like pick different things to watch because we'll watch TV for an hour or two or whatever before bed. She'll pick a TV series, then I'll pick one or movies or whatever. I just recently picked Alien and we watched through every Alien movie, which I included Predator. So we watched through all the Predator movies. Now that you've written Predator.
I'm proud of you.
Be proud of her. She enjoyed them. Okay. So now that you have written for Predator, rank the Predator movies for me.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, we have to put at the top of the heap the 1987 original because, that's where it all comes from.
That's what I think so too, but I'm curious if number 2 is what I think is number 2.
Ooh. Number 2 for me, it's a hard one. I would say either Prey or Killer of Killers. Killer of Killers just came out on Hulu, and it's animated, and it does what I did in Predator versus Wolverine, which tracks Wolverine across time, because Wolverine has all these different, versions of himself.
Yeah.
Like there's the Wolverine at the Westchester Mansion. There's the Wolverine in Japan. There's the Wolverine who's Weapon X. There's the Wolverine who's in the Canadian territories. There's the Wolverine who's in X-Force. There's Old Man. There's all these different versions of Logan. And so I have a Predator tracking him across time.
Oh, cool.
In the same way, this movie tracks Predators hunting badasses across time.
Yeah.
So there's the Viking warrior. There's the World War II jet fighter. Is that World War II or is it World War I? I'm spacing at this moment. And then there's the samurai era.
Yeah.
And that movie,
I watched it the day it came out.
It's animated, but it goes hard.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it.
Prey was my second favorite, so I'm glad that you picked that, and I hadn't even considered putting the animated one in there. So then where does it go from there?
I have a real fondness for Predator 2, despite the fact that it is somewhat problematic and also Danny Glover somehow beats the Predator.
Yeah.
but it's just so wonderfully cheesy. And Bill Paxton gets murdered, and he's been murdered by, a Terminator and an alien as well. So anything with Bill Paxton in it, I'm excited about. But I would actually say that in terms of quality, Predators,
that's what I would put too,
is above Predator 2,
yeah.
despite the nostalgia I have for Predator 2. So Predators is a great premise. It opens up with Adrian Brody falling through the air.
Yeah.
And you have no idea why. He's just falling from the sky. It just grabs you instantly.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he's landed in a jungle, and it's not a wartime jungle, as you might suspect. It's instead a hunting preserve. In this hunting preserve, the Predators are stocking it with all these warriors, these ultimate warriors, which includes a guy who's Yakuza and, a dude who's a gangster and on and on and on.
Eric from that 70s show.
Yeah. So, anyways,
yes,
I love Predators.
Yeah.
AVP, Aliens versus Predator. I'd pop that up there.
AVP 2 has got to be way at the bottom, though. Right?
It is, but I think the Predator is actually kind of lousy.
Yeah, I thought the ending was the worst ending of any Predator movie.
I just did not care about
Yeah.
anything that happened in that movie.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the lab studying a predator. The government lab studying a predator. I'm using some of that in my next storyline, which is Predator kills the Marvel Universe. There's been a release of an image of the Predator with a Weapon X helmet.
Wow.
So some of that, every movie I use a few ingredients from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Predator and AVP2 Requiem are probably the worst.
Yeah, I think they are too. And
but it's anything Predator is fun.
That's how I feel about Alien as well. And I'm so glad that Alien, Romulus, and Prey, being more recent movies from both franchises, were as good as they were and reminded people that these franchises need to live on forever and they need to keep making stuff, because I want to see new Alien movies, which they just announced Romulus 2, I believe, that's going to come out. So okay. I can't wait for that. And Prey was an incredible movie. Okay. You know way more about Wolverine than anybody, arguably anyways.
Arguably.
What are 3 facts about Wolverine people don't know?
Ooh. Well, I mean, if we're talking about just your everyday citizen and not the giant nerds that I encounter on a regular basis,
I believe it.
Do you know that because of his healing factor, Wolverine can't get drunk? He's always drinking, right? He's always down in beers and whiskey, but as soon as he pops that, in his mouth, it's already diffused.
So why does he drink it all then?
Because he likes the taste. He likes the taste.
That's about as manly as it gets. That's awesome.
Other things about Wolverine. I mean, he's defined by pain. He's unable to be happy. He's reluctant to be part of a team to help out, but he's always dragged into these situations where he's forced to do good. He's kind of always in these Unforgiven sort of situations, if you've seen that film. So he's a big softie is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Deep inside that cage of hair and muscle and adamantium, he's a big softie. That's fact number 2. Fact number 3, most people, I'm talking about the layman citizen right now. Most people don't know that one of the great moments in Wolverine's history is when Magneto, tears out his adamantium skeleton.
Oh, God.
Right. Which is just like an obvious move.
Yeah.
Here's this guy who's like 5'2". There's another Wolverine fact. Wolverine's 5'2". Sorry, Hugh Jackman. You're way too tall and way too handsome to be Wolverine. Wolverine, comics accurate Wolverine is 5'2". He's square shaped. But you just think it's obvious, right? He's made of metal. He wears 5'2", but he weighs 400 pounds because he's got all this metal sleeving his skeleton. And in this one issue, Magneto's like, let's go. And just rips the metal right off of his bones.
Wow. Okay. Instead of ranking all 9 of them, I know you've worked on some Star Wars stuff too, and we're not going to have time to dive into too much of that.
Got some more Star Wars coming out too. Top secret though.
Yeah. Well, it's because Disney has those NDAs. We'll have to do a part 2 or something to talk about when it comes out. What are your favorite 3 Star Wars movies?
Ooh. Giant Star Wars nerd. I will always, go to the original, episodes 4 through 6 as my favorites. But, I mean, I can't talk about Star Wars without talking about Andor, even though you're talking about movies. Like, I think Andor is like exceptional TV. One of my top 10 TV shows of all time, not just when we're talking about what's the best Star Wars.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's a lot of people out there that think that, Disney's just milking it. And I totally disagree. I think that Andor is incredible. And there's been a lot of different, they're not even spin-offs, but you know what I mean? There's all this extra universe stuff that have came out, like The Mandalorian, that is exceptional. I think they're very good. So you're an outdoors person. You've traveled all over the country, obviously, but you live in Minnesota now.
Yeah.
If people are going to go camping and they can go anywhere in Minnesota, what are your 3 favorite outdoor spots in Minnesota?
Ooh. Well, immediate answer is go up towards Grand Marais, Tofty, Lutsen, Grand Marais area. It's one of my favorite corners, not just of the state, but of the country. And, there's just like the big lake, there's the big woods. After you're going hard all day, you can go to Grand Marais, get a great meal, down some cold beers. It's dark sky country too. So like sun goes down, the adventure isn't over. You look up and you see the whole Milky Way and shooting stars and yeah.
What about James Bond? I know you wrote something briefly for them. If anyone goes to benjaminpercy.com, you have a list of like everything that you've written, which probably isn't even up to date. And there's a million of them.
It's so not up to date. I'm terrible about that kind of stuff.
That's okay. It's hard to keep track of everything. Which one is your favorite James Bond movie?
So I got a chance to write James Bond, a graphic novel called Black Box. And I grew up on Bond. It meant a lot to me to be able to put a little dent in the franchise. My favorite Bond, and this has to do with just like maybe early exposure, is actually Timothy Dalton Bond, who's like, he's a cold, blunt instrument of a Bond. He's not very charming. He's like chilling.
Yeah.
And I love that version of the character. I love all Bond. I love, the goofiness of the Roger Moore stuff. I think Daniel Craig's movies are probably the highest quality, especially Casino Royale and Skyfall.
Yeah.
And I love Sean Connery for just like his hairy swagger. But I think the Dalton one, it's like, Living Daylights.
What about Lord of the Rings? I know The Hobbit was one of the first books that you read that you were really into growing up. Yeah. At least that's what I had heard. So,
and read that to my daughter not too long ago and fell in love with it all over again.
That's a long book to read to your daughter.
Hobbit actually isn't too long. Lord of the Rings is long.
Oh, okay.
I read that to my son, and he was like, can we be done? Can we just watch the movies from here on out?
Who are your 3 favorite characters from that universe? Because there's like limitless.
Ooh. I have a special fondness for Gandalf, I think, in part because he oftentimes just abandons everybody.
Yeah.
He's just
you'll be all right.
Seemingly all-powerful guy, and he's like, good luck. Because he knows everybody has to like learn a lesson and earn out on their own.
Yeah.
So Gandalf is constantly like, see ya. He starts people on their journey and then escapes and comes back and pulls a Han Solo towards the end. Smeagol, Gollum, like just such a hideous character, but so fascinating the way he's torn in so many different directions in terms of his personality, his wants and desires. And then probably like Loyal Sam, you know, he's just like this stand-up guy who's doing everything he can for his pal. He's so selfless.
Every time I think of Sam, I think of when he played that actor, or when he was the actor in 50 First Dates with the mesh shirt, and he was on steroids and had a lisp. It's like so hard to picture him as anything other than that. Okay, let's get back to what we were actually talking about. So what are you working on now? I know you have like a newspaper thing that's going to be coming out. I know you just announced a bunch of like Punisher stuff, so I don't know if you're totally taking over that. You said you're still doing Wolverine. The Predator thing, is that just like separate from Wolverine, or is like what all things are you doing right now?
Got a lot of stuff coming out. Can't talk about all of it, but over at Marvel, I've got Predator Kills the Marvel Universe, which is like a culmination of the 3 series I've written so far. Predator versus Wolverine, Predator versus Black Panther, Predator versus Spider-Man, in the shops right now. Predator versus Kills the Marvel Universe is the culmination of all that. It releases in August through the fall. I'm writing Punisher. So Frank Castle is back in black, and we have a red band rating on that. We're going ultra violent. So
hell yeah.
Red band means like the comic comes out wrapped in plastic, because that's what a hard R rating it is. I have some other announcements yet to come at Marvel. There's also a Boba Fett issue coming out in September that I did.
Oh, cool.
Geeked about that. But yeah, like in other arenas, I'm doing 2 audio dramas that I can't talk about, but I'm excited about them. They're not connected to Marvel.
Wow, okay.
But they're one of them's a big IP situation.
One that you haven't touched yet?
I have not touched this particular monster yet. Yes.
Wow, okay.
So I'm excited. And the other one's a sci-fi thriller. And anyways, I'm doing those. I'm also putting out this newspaper. Yeah, cool. So it's called The End Times. And it's kind of me not giving it in a way. It's just like a project for fun.
Yeah.
It is a novel, a short novel told in the form of a newspaper. And so the world has essentially ended. You know, it's 10 years past.
Yeah.
And essentially 1% of the population survived. But the focus of this is not that. The focus of this is somebody trying to find meaning in this new world by launching a newspaper. And it starts off small. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It becomes like, it's sort of like, I described it as Station 11 meets Our Town, because it becomes a community of voices. And there's all sorts of bad stuff happening as well. And there's a certain suspense in only being able to get the story doled out once a month. So the way this works is you will get delivered to your home a newspaper for a year. Every month, you're going to get a newspaper. And we're using a small, a printing press. The publisher is Bad Hand Books. They're a Midwest publisher. They're willing to take this risk with me. They're based out of South Dakota. So Bad Hand Books. If you go to their website, you can order The End Times, and you can get it as a physical subscription, or you can get it as a digital subscription. The digital subscription is cheaper.
Right.
And it comes once a month to your inbox as opposed to your house. Wow. But there's comics in it. There's different voices in it that sort of tell the story of this community rising up in dark times.
What made you think to do that? No one's done that ever before, as far as I'm aware.
Not to my knowledge. Just, pushing back on publishing norms.
Sure.
It seemed like a tricky sort of idea, a fun idea.
It was a challenge.
Experiment.
So is there a place centrally where people can just like digitally download all of your works? I mean, they're through different people, right? Because you have DC stuff and Marvel stuff and whatever.
I'm all over the place.
Is there any like kind of central place to do that? And if people do that, when they like get digital downloads of things, do you get residuals from all that stuff?
It depends on the situation. With Marvel, DC, you don't really see, like, Marvel has a thing called Marvel Unlimited.
Okay.
And it's like you subscribe per month. So you can read as much as you want for Marvel Unlimited. So I don't get residuals from that.
Oh.
As opposed to people buying physical copies.
Right.
Yeah. But generally speaking, if you download a Kindle version of something, or if you listen to an Audible version of something, or if you order from bookshop.com, which is a great indie store, like clearinghouse.
Yeah.
Or if you go to my hometown shop, Content Books, you can order any of my books from there. and I'll sign them for you and personalize them for you, and they'll ship anywhere. So
yeah.
there's all sorts of different ways to find my stuff.
Awesome. Another question I had that I just didn't get to earlier is when I talked to Brent, I asked him kind of like, what's the direction when he's illustrating? Like, how much do people kind of break down that he has to do? And he kind of explained that it's different, obviously, all the time. But when you're looking at a comic and it has like the layout, when you're writing for it, do you first write it almost as just like a text story, and then you get like the layouts and you're like, okay, I have this many little, speech bubbles or whatever? Do you write all the speech bubbles in the layouts before the artist gets it? Like, how does that actually work?
I mean, everybody's different. There's no set format, unlike screenwriting.
Okay.
In screenwriting, if you hand in a script that doesn't look like everybody else's script, they won't read it. But in comics, everybody writes them differently. And I, early on, was able to contact different comics writers and different comics artists and say, send me your favorite scripts. And so I developed my own sort of style from that. I break down every panel, every page, every panel. My first collaboration on Detective Comics, Batman story, was with J.P. Leone. J.P. Leone sadly passed a few years ago, but left a huge gaping hole in the comics community. Super talented guy, super kind, generous guy as well. He told me early on, because I was like, help me out, help me be a better writer for you. He's like, don't stress out so much about like, this is a medium shot or a high diagonal or whatever. Like, he's like, don't be so pushy about that. Instead, make me feel like, write your scripts panel by panel, sure, but write the descriptions within those panels in such a way that I'm emotionally swept away, so that I feel lust, I feel fear, I feel adrenaline, and I'll transfer that emotion to the page if I'm invested in it. So I have these breakdowns, and most comics pages, you have 20 pages in a comic. You have 5 to 7 scenes.
Yeah.
The average number of panels on a page is probably 4. Sometimes, though, you do a single panel. It's called a splash page, like a single image that's really arresting. Sometimes maybe you're doing like close quarter combat. You want it to be really visceral. It might be a series of close-ups, and you might have 12 panels on that page, all clustered. Some people like to work within a grid. Other people like to be more experimental in their layouts. I always say to the artist, like, I'm going to unload everything that's in my head. Push back if you want. Yeah, sure. I trust your vision best. So I unload what's in my head, and panel by panel, it's like the most interesting frames in a movie. Imagine if you're scissoring them up and taping them together.
Yeah.
That's oftentimes how you're writing a comic.
So,
and I put all the dialogue, I put all the narrative captions in there as well.
So all the dialogue and everything that is going to be in their text, is that like hard when you send that to the illustrator? Like, these are what for sure has to fit, and then they kind of choose the layout?
Sometimes, if they see, this is a really dialogue-heavy panel, they'll make enough space for those balloons as a result.
Sure.
Wow.
But,
everything's a conversation. Right. And you always have the opportunity. There's constant approval. So, like, I'm getting in my inbox every day costume designs, secret layer designs,
sure,
new predator ship designs, whatever. I'm also getting like, here's the layouts, here's the pencils, here's the inks, here's the colors, here's the lettering draft, which includes sound effects, approvals all the way through. And at the end of that, what you usually do is you go through the script again and you make sure everything lines up the way it was. It might have been in your head one way, but now once all the art is done, you might change a few things.
Sure.
That's called the lettering script.
Yeah, and I imagine that's why people, once they start working with an illustrator or whichever people, they like to keep working with those same people.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they just know what to expect.
You work with an artist for a while, and you develop like a mind meld situation. And ideally, you're in constant contact. Like, if I'm working with this guy named Joshua Cassara, we text almost every day. He was the artist on X-Force. He worked with me on this Wolverine event. We're doing Deadpool Wolverine right now. Every day we text.
Wow. And you've gotten to hit pretty much every character. Okay. We gotta wrap this interview up. I asked one question. I try to at the end of every episode. If you need a second to think about it, you totally can. When you do something that you're passionate about for a living, such as writing, you get to have really unique experiences that are very meaningful to you, and they're rarely financially driven. Can you share a story of an experience like that for you? It could be having an impact on a certain person where you met them at a convention and it was like, oh, I didn't realize that I had that. It could be being on a movie set that you never expected to be. It could be getting a phone call to work on a certain character. It could be anything.
I mean, there are any number of those moments that happen, you know, in the course of a year, where you'll be at a comics convention and somebody says to you, "This story saved my life," or where you find yourself, as I did, on the set of The Night Agent, season 2, like hanging out with the cast, shadowing the director, you know, given this opportunity that I wouldn't have had, simply because I was expressed an interest in directing, and you know, I happened to know the right person who said, "Come on board, and let's help you figure this out."
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes, and maybe this is a full circle moment, the most meaningful moments can be when I'm in front of a classroom again. So I don't teach anymore except at writers' conferences occasionally, or when I'm brought out to universities for a visit. You know, I'll spend a day or two there and I'll do a reading, but I'll also meet with grad workshops, undergrad workshops. And sometimes when you're plugged into that energy again, you're surrounded by a group of like-minded individuals who all worship at the same altar of 26 letters, and you're just breaking stories, breaking sentences. You know, there's something infectious about that. And it reminds me, those moments, you know, whether I'm at the front of a classroom with a whiteboard or if I'm breaking down a manuscript with a student beside me, they just remind me why I got into this game to begin with.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and then all the connections that you make there, all these people that, you know, you speak to and then you stay in contact with because of how special social media can be if you use it in a positive way. And then you see something that they do 3 years later and you're like, holy shit, man, you are crushing it.
An example of that is Kavai Washburn. He's in the Twin Cities. I taught him in my creative writing workshop at Tin House, the Tin House Writers Workshop, probably 8 years ago now. Wow. And he, you know, was an urban planner. Like, that was his job. And this writing thing was just something fun he was doing on the side. Shows up in my classroom, I read a story and I was blown away by it. And I never do this, but I reached out to several editors. I was like, you got to publish this guy. And it wasn't because of me that, like, he's had his career arc, but early on, like, I was one of the first people he ever shared his work with. And I was like, I said then what everybody else has said in the meantime, which is hot. And he's since gone on. Like, again, he's in the cities now, and he's getting close to being a full-time writer. Oh, if he's not already. And he's got this great novel out. He's got another great novel, Kavai Washburn, look him up. And that sort of stuff is so meaningful. He's one example of many where it's just like, you see people, rise up and you have some small part, you know, in their success. Maybe it's just like introducing them as the right person, or, you know, just giving them an encouraging pat on the back.
Yeah.
You play some small role, but it fills up your heart a little bit.
But you remember all the small roles that other people had with you.
Absolutely.
In random little bits of advice somebody gave you that had a drastic impact on you, or, you know, your friend who was working with DC that was like, oh, this guy. It's like, it may seem small to you, but it could be monumental to them. Let me give you a couple of gifts before we get out of here. You like coffee? Yes?
I love coffee.
Okay. There's coffee in front of you. So that coffee, which you can grab that bag, that's from Minimum Wage Tim Frederick. That's in Minneapolis. And he actually travels all over the place. I'm not sure if he went to Honduras for those beans or not. But he roasts them himself. And that's available at a lot of places in Minnesota.
So cool. I love the Vonnegut-esque self-portrait as well.
He does look like that. To go along with that, you can pick out one of the coffee mugs that are on the table. Those are available on my website, passionpod.org.
I'm going to have to go black because that's the color of the shadows inside me.
I feel like that fits with your personality the most. And then, I don't know if you need headphones or not, but Skull Candy just gave me their new Dime sweet. Evos. So these are $59.95 usually, but those are for you to keep or give to your daughter, whatever.
Thank you.
Depends on like how generous you want to be.
Thanks to Skull Candy.
All right. Well, everyone needs to go follow you, which is it just Benjamin Percy on Instagram and all the platforms?
Something like that. I don't know that I'm particularly good at social media, but I am on social media, and you can find me there on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, X, you know, I'm on there sometimes promoting my work and sometimes just, cracking dad jokes.
But at least then people can see when you have a new Predator thing come out. Do you have a newsletter or anywhere else that people can keep up with where it actually
I thought about doing the newsletter, and I just I'm already working 70 hours.
Adding another thing to your plate isn't going to happen. Okay, well, everyone needs to go follow you on the socials. You can find me at Passion Pod anywhere. On Instagram, it's just Passion Pod. That's the one I'm most active on if you want me to actually see a message. You can find merch and all that stuff on passionpod.org. And you can find the show on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and everywhere else.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.